Okay, everybody, this is the third of three videos for this week. This last one here on risk management, or kind of a crash course on sport law that applies mostly to you as coaches. It's important to really think about doing risk management to reduce the risk of injury and or um, special circumstances or issues with your athletes and others that you come in contact with or work with in your coaching experiences. Um, Legal liability are your responsibilities and duties between persons enforceable by others. So you have to make sure you know what your legal responsibilities are. When we talk about coaching, a lot of times there is a concern about negligence, which is understandable because you have the health and safety of athletes in your hands and you are responsible for them, and you have to make sure that you are not negligible when you I'm sorry, negligent when you are working with your athletes. So that is a common concern or complaint, is that coaches are negligent with their athletes. So you want to make sure that you are covering your bases when we talk about potential negligent situations when you are working with your athletes. There are when you In terms of negligence, there are four areas that you have to confirm that absolutely happened for in order to be considered actually being negligent. So you may be a little irresponsible and have maybe taken a couple of bad steps, but to be actually negligent is an enforceable legal issue, and all four things have to connect in order for you to be actually held negligent. You have to be the person that's in charge, or have legal duty over the injured party. Um, you have to have actually demonstrated that you had failed the duty that you were supposed to be fulfilling, that there was actually an injury to the person that happened under when you had the duty of being in oversight of that person, and then did your failure to fulfill your duty actually cause the injury? So you have to be the one that was actually in charge. You have to have failed to fulfill the duty of being in charge. There was injury that actually happened, and the injury happened because you failed to fulfill your duty. Because here's the deal: a lot of things can happen to athletes that not really your doing. It's not because you failed to do something or didn't do something that they got injured. And so there's many instances where the athlete themselves are being irresponsible, they get injured, and and parents may see it as negligence on your part, but that may not be the case. So it's important that you understand and you are aware and you keep track of what you are responsible for, what is your duty to fulfill, um, what do you do in the case of an athlete getting injured under your watch, under your responsibility, that you give them the help that they need to help assist them in that kind of situation, so that you can avoid any kind of issues with negligence as best as you can. All the things that you do as a coach when you're working with other people is think about risk management. Risk management provides sort of a safe guideline and an environment um, where you avoid litigation altogether, because you are sort of assessing and looking at the potential risk factors, and you're managing them from the get-go. Um, and what you want to do when you're thinking about risk management is the first thing you want to do is just identify what the potential risks are. And on the slide shown in your book, it talks about sort of your 10 legal duties um, that are like sort of at greatest risk for you, to help you um, identify what some of those risks are. And then you want to evaluate the risks, right? So once you sort of think about what the potential risks are, right? So whether it's issues with the facility that maybe might cause injury, or issues with the time you get home at night after a game, whatever the potential risks are that you identify that fit your um, sport and the what you have available to you to run your sport. You want to evaluate what those risks are. You want to consider where you have the probability of injury, what the potential injury probability is. So whether that's like often and frequently to seldom. And you also want to be thinking about the financial impact. Is it a high or is it a medium or low impact financially, that risk, that item under your list of risk factors. And then you want to select an approach to manage the risk, right? So you want to decide if you're going to transfer that issue to somebody else, if you're going to avoid it, or you're going to just accept the risk, right? So those are the things you want to be thinking about, is how you will manage, um, how you will select to manage the risk. And then you have to implement the approach. So if you're going to avoid it, you're not going to engage in that risk behavior. So if you recognize, like, oh, teaching something that way to my athletes is high risk, it's a high risk, there could be lots of potential for injury, I'm just going to avoid teaching that altogether, right? Or uh, playing in that particular location is really bad for us. It's created a lot of injuries and we have a lot of issues with it, so we're going to avoid playing in that space altogether if we can, right? Um, you could accept it, you have to live with it. You have to understand, like, these are risks and I'm willing to take them, but I'm ready for them if something should happen. Or you just transfer the risk, so you create a different arrangement to manage that risk, whether it's putting the responsibility in someone else's hands or doing an alternative option to avoid that risk altogether. These are the ways that you can manage the risks once you decide the sort of the magnitude of the risk, and then that's how you can implement. Then you can go ahead and implement the approach on how you're going to manage that risk. Um, so with all this, you want to be thinking about your 10 legal duties. You have to properly plan the activity. You have to provide proper instruction. You have to warn of the inherent risks. You have to provide safe physical space. You have to match athletes appropriately, right? You can't expect them to do things that they're not really capable of doing. You have to evaluate the athletes for injury, make sure that if they are injured, that you're figuring out what their capacity and their ability is. If they are not injured, what are some trouble spots or potential injury prone uh, things that they ways that they function, right? So understanding that is important. You have to supervise the activity closely. You need to provide proper emergency assistance and then protect against physical and psychological harm to others. These are your 10 legal duties as a coach. You need to recognize where potentially you have some risk management to take care of in and under those 10 areas. Um, and so, again, really important things to think about, because you maybe not have thought about, matching athletes to their abilities. But that's really super important, that you're not trying to push a child that's not really physically or mentally mature enough to do certain things, that you're trying to make them keep up with athletes that are kids and athletes that are beyond their means or their abilities. So it's important that you're able to assess those things and act accordingly. So a couple of good things to think about with risk management is keep adequate records. This is really hard for people, is to like document, but you should document lots of things. You should document how you assess your players, how you've evaluated them, what you have said to them in terms of your expectations of them, and with that, having documentation of your season practice plans and any kind of conversations you've had with your athletes. Because if someone were to say you weren't taking care of my daughter or my son, or you weren't thinking about their needs, and you're able to pull out documentation that says, well, we talked about these things, and here's what we addressed with them, and here's what we agreed upon, that's going to go a long way to help you with proving that you were not ignoring some of these things that this athlete needed from you. um, so also with that, you just want to make sure you're documenting as much as possible health history forms, um, facility management checklists, consent forms, any policies related to discrimination, hazing, bullying, this stuff, sexual harassment. All of these are records that you should keep, documents you should keep records of, right? So I'm going to have you do some of these I'm going to have you practice writing out some of these risk management um, guidelines or policies. You'll do those towards the end of the semester because, again, these are good things for you to have documented. And number one, for you to have as a guideline to follow, but two, again, so that you have something to address with your athletes. And then if someone were to come back to say, like, you don't talk about these things or you don't address these things, you can show proof of how you do that. Also, with risk management, you need to make sure you're providing safe transportation. Obviously, the best type of transportation, if it's not provided through the school or the program that you are coaching under, is that you have them use public transportation. That's obviously the best, or their own transportation that can be provided by their family. But if that doesn't work, then a school or agency vehicle, obviously, if you can get that to work for you, that's great and preferable. Oops, excuse my dog Moxie. She's shaking it out. Um, uh, but if you use your own vehicle to transport athletes, you really need to make sure that you're looking into insurance coverage options, because transporting people and potentially getting into an accident can be a really treacherous thing. So you want to make sure that your insurance that you take out for being a coach is covered. The transportation is covered so that you mitigate your risks, your risk there. Um, Continuing on with risk management, you want to make sure that you follow due process. You should understand your constitutional rights and due process with that, not only for yourself, but for your athletes too, like what constitutional rights they have and the due process that you may have to go through in order to um, manage an area of risk. Which this also all means that you should pursue proper training. You know, you should definitely, this class is obviously one way to feel properly trained, to prepare to work with your athletes and provide safe and healthy environments for them in which to play and participate. Practice, play, and participate, but there's certainly continuing opportunities for more certifications or other types of um, just professional development that you should take advantage of. And you should do those things. And anytime you can take any kind of like seminar or webinar or class, some workshop on these aspects of coaching that can help you be a better coach, you should take advantage of it. So if you have an opportunity to go to a risk management workshop, or if you have the opportunity to go to diversity inclusion workshop, these are things that are good for you to develop professionally that will help you help your athletes and those that you work with in your program. The last little thing to talk about with risk management are waivers and participation agreements. Um, Participation agreements are really the best ones to use. They're preferable. It's a signed document that the athlete and their guardian sort of helps them acknowledge that they know what the inherent dangers are to the sport they're going to participate, and they appreciate what those dangers are, that they're aware of the rules of the sport, and they're going to, with all that knowledge, they're going to still agree to participate knowing that there's the potential to get injured. It's important to have, to make it clear when you have, whether it's a team meeting or you are doing some kind of organization, information night or whatever it is, that you make it abundantly clear that, when you play this high contact sport of football, even with fully padded and a helmet, equipment check that we do and make sure that our athletes are wearing, you can still get your concussions. It's a real concern when you're playing football, that it's a high concussion rate sport. And so that's something that's important for people to be aware of, because if they aren't aware of that, that can create some issues and problems where they may think it's your negligence that created the environment in which a child got the concussion, right? So these are things that you want to be thinking about, is like, within a participation agreement, how do you outline what potential issues are, or not issues, but like injuries that could happen to your athletes? Again, you're going to do a little participation agreement form. You're going to create one for yourself. Again, this is going to be a little bit later in the semester, but it'll be good practice for you so that you have something like that that you can use if you need it in the future. So the last thing with risk management is insurance. You should definitely get liability insurance. You want to make sure when you do that, there's kind of a list of questions you should be asking about what is covered in that liability, or covered in that liability insurance. Are events covered, property, activities, locations, etc. So you want to make sure you know everything that's covered. You want to be thinking about if you should get like a personal liability insurance that's kind of added to like a homeowner's insurance or coverage, or if you can get it like through your professional organization, or if it's just a separate personal policy that you get. But some you should have some liability insurance because you're responsible for these people, and if you're going to take proper steps, you want to make sure that you are protected under law, that you did the proper steps when you were supposed to, you documented everything. Trust me, in this very litigious society that we live in, you're going to want to be sure that you kind of protect yourself in this role as a coach, because you are responsible for human beings, right? Their physical well-being and their emotional well-being, and it is a very large responsibility, and so you want to make sure that you're holding yourself accountable by making sure you're managing these risks, but also that you're protecting yourself if an issue does arise that is erroneous or is misguided in terms of how what people are claiming about how you're managing the team. Um, so you answered some questions through the reflection assignment about this, and then because what you're doing for chapters 18 and 19 and the assignment I gave you is quite a lot, I have you doing some of these risk management forms later in the last part of the semester, because again, it's helpful for you to have like a facility checklist, a health and safety plan, a waiver form, or like a participation agreement form, etc. Right? So it's helpful for you to have all these particular forms, again, to use as at least a foundation or guideline for steps that you're going to need to take in the future when you're a coach when it comes to risk management of your program. So that's part 5, chapters 18, 19, and 20. You have your questions for reflection due next Tuesday, April 7th. You have the kind of homework assignment that's posted on Moodle that has to do with information management and personal relationship management. That's due next Tuesday. You're going to be working on some of this risk management stuff later in the semester, so don't worry about that so much right now, outside of just answering the questions in the reflection assignment. But the last thing that is your coaching demo that you have to, the video that you need to email me no later than next Tuesday. So everything is kind of due over the next week by next Tuesday. One thing I wanted to address really quick before I sign off here for today, for this week, is your observation assignment, your coaching observation assignment. Maybe you can hear my daughters in the background. They're getting excited. Um, so probably most of you haven't been able to observe a coach, and you really aren't going to be able to do it at this point because nothing is happening in the sports world. Like, it's just bizarre. So there's an alternative to that assignment that I had not posted it yet. I was reworking it, but it will have to do with you observing coaches in a different capacity, pretty much online, because we just don't have the opportunity to observe coaches right now live. But also interviewing coaches and talking to coaches. You can do that via FaceTime, over phone, etc. So make sure that you check that out, because you still need to do an observation assignment. It's still important that you think about talking with coaches or watching coaches operate, and reflecting on style and different approaches to things in terms of managing your team. So that assignment is still going to be due towards the end of the semester, so make sure you're staying on top of that and getting that done as well. So I think I've updated you on all the assignments and all the work so far in the semester. I mean, so far for this week and up to this point. If you have any questions, drop me a line. Otherwise, I'm excited to see your videos. This should be fun, and I'll probably post some of the best ones on our Moodle page. Not to dismiss not to dismiss anybody, but just to sort of share some of the things that your classmates have done, maybe to help you think about planning for your final demo video that you're going to have to share, that you will be sharing with the class via our Moodle page. All right, everybody, have a great week. Hope everything's going well. I hope you're getting outside and getting some exercise. Certainly, that's something that you're able to do right now and should take advantage of as much as possible. I think warmer weather is consistently is on its way, so hopefully you're enjoying some time outside. Take care, everybody.